We're here at the Brickmania store in Chantilly, Virginia, and my latest collaboration, well, basically my only collaboration at this point, is this good fella Matt and me, and we've put together a little display of Gettysburg. Matt, what do we got going on here?
Yeah, so the first thing we start out with right here, what you're looking at, is a map of Gettysburg, a general map, and depicting some key locations. Of course, you got Seminary Ridge over there by the number 1 with the unfinished railroad. To your right, you've got the Plum Run, which is number 2, and then Meade's headquarters at number 3, and then Evergreen Cemetery is at number 4, which we've built and put on display here at the Chantilly store.
And so basically this is a representation. The tan is all the major roads that were in the area. The black, what?
No, that's correct.
And then the black is the town. This is the railroad, and this is where they had finished it, and then this is the unfinished portion, and this is where they were digging it out. And so these are forests right here that we're kind of representing, so everything's kind of represented here. The peach orchard is over here, Devil's Den, Little Round Top, Big Round Top. So everything's represented. And anyway, so the numbers correspond with certain scenes we have represented. So the first one is the railroad cut. And Matt, do you want to tell us more about this?
Sure. So at the railroad cut, you had the 2nd Mississippi, the 22nd Mississippi, and I can't remember the North Carolina regiment that had decided to go into a rail cut, thinking it would be a good position to fight the oncoming Union. And what they realized, it ended up being a trap for them, because at the decision of the commanders on the scene of the 6th Wisconsin of the Iron Brigade, which you see depicted right here in front of you, the 95th New York Infantry Regiment coming up in the middle, and then the 14th Brooklyn. The unique part about this at the rail cut is the 14th Brooklyn and the 6th Wisconsin had fought together numerous times, and the Black Hats were considered the Western Iron Brigade, and then the Red-Legged Devils were considered the Eastern Iron Brigade. So it's kind of fun to have them depicted together on the battlefield at the rail cut. This is also where Corporal Waller fought with the 2nd Mississippi Guidon carrier for the flag and won the Medal of Honor for his acts in capturing that flag. And what ended up happening is about 200 Confederate troops were captured inside the rail cut and taken as prisoners.
And so when you had first built out basically 2 48 by 48 by 2 48 by 48 base plates, correct?
Correct.
And then we decided, we got here, he brought basically his entire parts catalog, and we were like, you know what? Let's expand this by 7 base plates?
7 32 by 32 base plates.
Yeah.
Here, because a couple things we wanted to capture. One, you couldn't give the magnitude of all the 3 units moving together, and it would just be too crowded. 2, I really wanted to include the worm fence and the post and rail fence, which actually played a major obstacle in the approach of the Union forces, because the Confederates took advantage of that as the obstacles and shooting and killing quite a few of the approaching Union troops.
Yes, and I love this post and rail design. He came up with that. How many attempts would you say you had at the post and rail?
Too many. I couldn't even give you a count. Same with the worm fence. I spent more time trying to figure out designs and unique ways of putting those together to really depict what it's like out there. Because if you go to Gettysburg, those are some of the things that stand out.
Yes, for sure. As far as the color palette, what were you thinking about when you chose the colors?
Yeah, so one, I wanted to make sure I kept more of the earth tones, which you would see in nature. Bright green just didn't seem conducive, but 2, I also wanted to pull out the uniforms and have a contrast with the uniforms, so that you could see what was going on, especially with the color that Brickmania put together.
Yes, this was really nice. Now moving on to the next thing, we have Plum Run over here. Tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so Plum Run is where the 1st Minnesota, these are all occurred on day 1 actually. The 1st Minnesota was given direction to hold the line and fill a gap, and they held it for 15 minutes. And took 82% casualties, 80 to 82% casualties. Bottom line, they were decimated and became combat ineffective by the end. And they had approaching them 3 different regiments from Wilcox's brigade. It was Wilcox, wasn't it? Yeah. was Wilcox's brigade.
I don't remember the specifics.
Yeah, so it's Wilcox's brigade, and that's Wilcox up there kind of keeping an eye on things as his troops are approaching. But the 1st Minnesota conducted a bayonet charge, which halted the advance of the Confederates basically enough for them to decide to regroup and allowed reinforcements to move in from the Union forces.
And so when making Plum Run, how did that go?
That was a unique process because, once again, you go out to Plum Run out in Gettysburg. It's kind of marsh-like. It is in a forested area, but I wanted to make sure that you could capture. It also was filled with water at the time, so I wanted to capture some of those elements and bring in the different colors and earth tones underneath.
Yeah, that really sold that whole effect, and the rocks that you have in the run is great as well. So as far as minifigures, like, how did you come about all these different Confederates and everything? What was the process like?
Yeah, the process was like at first, long before I was working directly with Dan and Brickmania, I was collecting figures from various colors, to include your own with the butternuts. First off, the Confederates were uniformly ununiformed. They just had a variety between the early war and the late war, and this is late war. And the other piece was working on getting different hats, kepis, and that type of stuff, because they were not consistent across the board. And then I worked with Brickmania on producing certain units. Now, 1st Minnesota they'd already produced, but like the 14th Brooklyn that we all saw, and the Iron Brigade and some of the others, we had discussed of producing for this particular mock.
And so how many years has this been in the progress?
Collecting and starting the thought process a couple years, but really coming down to in the last year or so is really when I focused in and started working on it. And then the first mock I actually built is this one right here, which is Meade's headquarters. And all these are 3 areas that not necessarily, they are talked about amongst historians and that type of stuff, of key decisions and elements in the battle, but not necessarily the ones that Hollywood focuses on. And of course, Meade's decision to stay and fight with his Council of War on the evening of the first night was a major decision on the Union's ultimate victory at the site of Gettysburg.
Yes.
And this just shows Meade approaching his headquarters with his staff standing by inside with his corps commanders.
And then, so the last thing, which is actually the one I did, and I had done a little round top, but I just wasn't happy with how it turned out. I'll show a picture up on screen of what it is now, but we're going to go in and revitalize it. And this is going to be an ever-expanding thing, but if you want to come see this, you can come see it at the Chantilly store here, and the Brickmania store in Chantilly. There we go. And so we plan to do some expansions on this. One thing we talked about is that's already been worked on is Devil's Den and Little Round Top. We want to kind of make that a pretty big centerpiece, correct?
Yeah.
And have our 2 mocks link up together. I want to do the Lutheran Seminary. What is
Seminary.
it? Seminary, that's it. I want to do that one. So I have a lot of red brick on this red brick here from another mock. But this is the Evergreen Cemetery arch. It was one of the few buildings that there's a lot of buildings in Gettysburg that's still there, but this is one building that was there at the time of the battle, and so I wanted to recreate that, and basically just got on Google Street View, and I also Google Earth, the 3D modeling that they have on there, and did it that way. And I also got some reference images at the time. There was a famous painting of Winfield Hancock here, which I don't think he was an Iron Brigade, but he did have an interesting hat, and so I wanted to recreate that painting of him in front of the arch there. I used some jumpers to kind of make that wall indent slightly, but nothing real special there. So that's all I have to contribute, unfortunately, but hopefully with Little Round Top, we'll contribute a little bit more. I did help build that out.
We spent a weekend working on that one.
The expansion. But so after Little Round Top, Devil's Den, what are the other things you were thinking about doing?
Seminary Ridge on the morning of day 3, where the Confederate artillery was lined up and preparing the battlefield for the advance of the infantry for what became known as Pickett's Charge. That's one of my goals, is to have Seminary Ridge with the artillery batteries as well as the infantry getting ready to advance.
And then also expanding out the cannons that we already have there.
Correct.
You have enough cannon, just not enough terrain built out.
That is
Right.
true. I do. I have plenty of cannon. Yeah.
Well, there you go. There you have it. Again, if you would like to see this, you can see it at the Brickmania Chantilly store. We're thinking like November is when you're going to have other stuff added.
Yeah, between, of course, I know you guys are going to work with labeling the map and that type of stuff, but November, and I may come up a little bit sooner just to make some additions on the artillery pieces. I'd like to get a full battery in place.
All right. Well, I guess that's it, and we'll maybe see you here.
Yeah.